Good afternoon. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. This is Sunday night, so we're in the New Testament. We have a live program going, and this is the videotape of the lesson part. Some of our chats and some of our talks and some like that we don't record, but the lesson we do. Um, on Wednesday nights, we're in the Old Testament. By the way, this is our third trip through the Bible. We started this visiting with an old friend from live video a minute ago. We started this about 12 years ago and went clear through the Bible, not in any specific order, but we did the whole Bible. The second time through the Bible, we used this book, the chronological Bible. I'm using it now because on Sunday nights, we're in the New Testament, and I prefer to, Captain's downstairs. I'm answering something that's on the chat. He called me and told me he was hungry, and I know he was because I didn't feed him earlier today. And he didn't want his head rubbed. He didn't want, there was no, I love you, Barbara, none of this. He wanted food. And as soon as the food was in his gate, he was gone. Yeah, I'll have to bring him up more frequently. All right. We're talking about now a number of smaller things. We're in Christ's third year of ministry. Actually, we are about halfway through the third year. So we have a lot of incidental things that are not well taught, well preached, well studied. But anyway, this particular about a boy who was a demoniac that was healed. We have it in Matthew 17, in Mark 9, and in Luke 9. So you can see why I would want to use this particular Bible to do the Gospels. Otherwise, we would do this same story when we were in Matthew 17. We would do it again in Mark 9. And we would do it again in Luke 9. So this is the reason, well, we're in the Gospels, which most of them wrote about the same thing. I would prefer to do it this way. It says when they came, there was a multitude, and there was a man who was kneeling down. Not everybody really knew who the Lord was. We're going to find out as we continue reading today that I'm not sure his disciples had it all figured out. There are a lot of things that even for us, and we have a lot more teaching than they had. They were with him for three and a half years. And I've been teaching this through the Bible for over 12. So obvious there's things we have more teaching on than his disciples did. It's hard for people to understand the Trinity. How can there be one God in three persons? You have to admit, it's difficult to understand. So there's a lot that they found difficult to understand. But there's a man came to him. Now remember, since we've been reading the Gospels, everybody that's been healed has been healed of one of two things. Either of a disease, which is what most people suffer from today, and if they're healed, are healed of today. And the other is a demon. Well, this man came and knelt before him and said, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he's a lunatic. He's vexed. Oftentimes he falls into the fire, he falls into the water. And he says, I brought him to your disciples and they couldn't cure him. Earlier in our study of the Gospels, welcome back, Granny. Earlier in our study of the Gospels, we read that he anointed them and ordained them and sent them out to preach and to heal. And they went out and they came back and told of their successes. But this man said, I brought him to your disciples and they couldn't cure him. Then Jesus said, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? Bring him hither to me. This young man that was sick was obviously sick because he had a demon. It says, and Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him. And the child was cured from that hour. We know that it takes faith for miracles, and we know that it takes faith for answered prayer. And I think probably this is what the disciples lacked. And I think they probably lacked this deep faith because they were totally not sure who Jesus was. Remember, they were so sick and tired of the Roman government. And Jesus talked about his kingdom and his Father's kingdom. And they kind of had the feeling it's going to happen now. Remember, on Palm Sunday, it had been predicted in the book of Daniel that after 483 years out of 490, two things would happen. Israel would be presented with their king, and Messiah would be cut off. Well, Israel was presented with their king on Palm Sunday. They treated him like a king. He came in on a donkey, the foal of a donkey, like kings did. He came in the door, the gate, they all came in. And they even called him Son of David. The Jews knew that Messiah would be from the generation of King David. That happened on a Sunday, and of course on Friday, Messiah was cut off. That means finished, dead, done. I think probably their faith was lacking because they really didn't understand. It says, and now behold, the hand of the Lord is upon thee. Hang on. I don't know how I happened to look on a different page, but I did. Temporarily lost my place. Then Jesus said, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and suffer you? Bring him to me. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, how come we couldn't cast them out? You know, we have in the past. And Jesus said, because of your unbelief, which is a lack of faith. Ye have faith of a grain of a mustard seed. He's saying you don't have a lot of faith. You don't need a lot, just a tiny bit. A tiny bit of the real thing is all you need. And Jesus rebuked the devil. See, a lot of times we don't know why they're sick. In this country, we don't have as much of the dark side of things as there are sometimes in other countries. We have a lot of Jewish people, we have a lot of Christians. So we have kind of a background of faith here. But in places where everybody is serving the devil, I have known of missionaries, and they have battled all night in prayer over some very difficult thing that's happening. And I have not been in as many of those situations as some of my friends have. Our missionaries go, they tend to start churches. And then once you have a church, it's like a church here. And you don't come against these dark things as often. But Jesus rebuked the devil and the child was cured. And his disciples said, why couldn't we cast him out? And he said, because of your unbelief. He said, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, I understand that a mustard seed is the smallest seed that exists. Then you can say, remove from here to there. King James says, remove hence to yonder place. And it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible for you. But we have many occasions where Jesus went alone by himself. Occasionally, he took Peter, James, and John, and then left them somewhere and went a little bit beyond. You can't live every day one way. Let's say kind of mediocre. Is that a good word? It's a word I grew up with. You can't have medium faith, live a Christian life, and then come face to face with the demon and cast it out. You have to be you have to be living the way you should be living, and that comes by prayer and fasting, which means separating yourself from other people for a while and finding a way to be alone with the Lord. Now, we have the same story in Mark 9. And toward the end of the story in Mark 9, it says, Jesus said unto him, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. And straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. We all need to live more highly than we do. And Jesus saw the people came running together, and he rebuked the foul spirit and said, thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him and enter no more. And the spirit cried and rent him sore, kind of hurt himself, appears like he's beating up on himself. And the spirit came out of him, and he was like one dead. In other words, somebody that's beating on themselves and hurting on themselves, now they're just wasted. They've gone through all of that, and now they have no more energy left. Many people said he's dead. And Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up. And when he was come unto the house, the disciples asked privately, why couldn't we do this? Now begins Jesus to talk about his death and resurrection. Yeah, we have this in Matthew 17 and Mark 9 and Luke 9. Matthew is the longest one, so it's going to give us most information. While they abode in Galilee, Jesus said unto them, the Son of Man will be betrayed into the hands of men. What's he predicting there? He's predicting he's going to be betrayed by Judas. And they shall kill him. And the third day he shall be raised again. Have you ever counted the days and realized that it is not 3 whole days that Jesus was in the tomb? what was the custom then was any portion of a day was charged as a day. That's sort of like a hotel, isn't it? If you're there for an hour or two, you could charge for a whole day. He was in the tomb a little bit on Friday. He had to be before it got dark. When it got dark, it was Saturday. So he was a little bit of Friday in the tomb. He was 24 hours of Saturday in the tomb. When it got dark Saturday night, that would have been the end of the second day. And Jesus arose sometimes between Saturday night when it got dark and Sunday morning when the women saw him at the tomb. So he was an hour maybe in the tomb on Friday, 24 hours on Saturday, and I'm guessing about 7 hours on Sunday. And they shall kill him, and the third day he shall be raised again. You know, they didn't understand this. Why were they so upset when he was betrayed and upset when he was killed? Wouldn't you think they would say, yeah, he told us that was going to happen. He was buried. Yeah, he said he would be. But he also said he would be raised again. It was just a concept they weren't able to understand. And the third day he'll be raised again. And they were exceedingly sorry. Luke says only 2 verses. Let these sayings sink down into your ears, for the Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of men. That's being betrayed. But they understood not this saying. It was hid from them, and they perceived it not, and they feared to ask him what they didn't understand it, but they didn't say, sorry, Jesus, we didn't understand it. Would you explain it to us? Luke says, let your sayings sink down into your ears, for the Son of Man shall be delivered into the hands of men. But they understood not this saying. It was hid from them, and they were too afraid to ask. Now he goes to Capernaum. And in Capernaum, he pays his taxes. We have this only in Matthew 17. Matthew is the only one that tells about this. They came to Capernaum. They that received tribute money came to Peter. Peter already seems like kind of a leader. He's the one that got up on the day of Pentecost and did the preaching. He's the one that got up and said to everybody, we got to elect another disciple because we're known as the 12. And now there's only 11 of us. When they got to Capernaum, now Matthew was a tax collector, one of the disciples. They got to Capernaum, and the tax collecting people went to Peter. And they said, does your master pay tribute? There's an interesting thing here. What is the purpose of taxes? It keeps the government going. If your government is a king, you pay taxes to the king to keep up his house, his salary, his clothes, his cars, his horses, whatever. Remember, Jesus is king, but they don't get that part of it. And he says, yes. So when they come to the house, Jesus said, what are you thinking, Simon? Which was Peter's other name. Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom tribute? Well, from the people that supposedly they serve. We give money, tribute, taxes, so that the government can run. And that government can be a king. That government can be a prime minister. It can be a group of people running a country, but that's what you pay taxes for. Remember that when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Mary and Joseph went there. Why? Because Caesar wanted to know how many people he had so he would know how much tax to charge. And in order to know that, he had them go to some place and register. And he said the likely place is for you to go where your family's from. And both Mary's family and Joseph's family both happened to be of the house of David, and Bethlehem was the city of David. Whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute from? Of their own children or of strangers? The government doesn't take money from its own family. It takes money from us, regardless of what kind of a government you have. Peter said, strangers. They don't tax their children. They tax us. Jesus said unto him, then are the children free? You happen to be the children of the government. They don't have to pay. Anyway, Jesus, in order not to set a bad example, I don't know how many times you've done something because you didn't want somebody else to feel bad. I have many times. When we traveled, a lot of the churches we went to were very, very, very old-fashioned. And some of the churches were more modern. Evangelists always make arrangements with the pastor, and most of the pastors were men. Rosa and I couldn't tell by talking to the pastor how the women dressed in their church. Now, if a pastor had the women in their church dressing very old-fashioned, we wouldn't show up looking modern. I'm looking modern because my sleeves are above my elbow. So this would be modern dress. Just before, in 1971, we were on our way to Central America, and we stopped at the house of the man who began the Spanish movement in the United States. And his wife was kind of old-fashioned. After being the district superintendent and the head of this, the head of the other, the founder of this, that, and the other, he settled down and pastored a small church in San Antonio. And we were going to preach in his church. We didn't know anything about his church. So we're dressed, longer sleeves, longer skirts, whatever. And his wife said, oh, I see you all dressed real old-fashioned. Do you do that all the time? And I said, no. I only do this. We only dress very, very, very conservative the first time we go. And then we have a chance to see what the women in the church dress like, what the pastor's wife dress like, what the deaconesses wear. Because I don't want to do anything. If a pastor's preaching to his people and saying, you got to have your elbows covered up, I'm not going to go in and a sleeve and my elbow showing. Now this, you've got to realize, is about 60 some years ago. But I've done things that are not me, but I've done it in order not to offend anybody, because it would make it very hard for a pastor to invite me to preach and I show up in modern dress, which now would be, I guess, leggings and a t-shirt. And then I'm gone and he's back to telling the people they've got to wear dresses. if I did that, I would be making it hard for him. So I have a choice. So I take the way that I think will make it better for him. Jesus here did something. He didn't have to, but he did. Peter said unto him, of strangers, then are the children free, notwithstanding, lest we offend them. Most of us say, well, it's my right to wear what I want to. Or it's my right to use this language. Or it's my right to do such and such. Yeah, it might be. And if you did it, it would probably offend God. But you can't put your feelings on other people. And Jesus said, just to get it over with, lest we offend them. Go cast a hook. Don't take a boat. Just stand out on the dock and cast a hook down. And you'll get a fish. The first fish that comes up, open up his mouth and you'll find a coin, a piece of money. Take it and give them that, and that'll take care of your taxes and mine. And he came to Capernaum, and being in the house, he asked them, what was it that you disputed with yourself along the way? Well, that is Mark, and that's only one verse. That's the only thing that Mark says about the whole thing. Now Jesus is talking about humility and the forgiveness of sin, and of all things, his disciples want to know which of them is the most important. Remember, the mother of one of them, one of her sons, she understood about heaven and where all this was going. And she said, could one of my sons sit on your right and one of my sons sit on your left? At the same time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Is it me? And Jesus saw a little child and he called him. He said, except you become like a child, put the child in front of him. You won't enter the kingdom of heaven. You're not going to go into the kingdom of heaven thinking you're all that. The greatest preacher in the New Testament was Paul. Paul had a disease. And 3 times he asked God to heal him, and God didn't. You say, is that fair? He just said he was one of the greatest preachers. His writings have taught Christians how to live. Is he not the greatest? God kept him from thinking he was. Because 3 times he asked to be healed. We think that part of this had to do with his vision, and part of this had to do with a weakness, that a tendency he had. And God said, I'm not healing you. Because if I heal you, you'll think you're all that. And this disease, whatever it is, will keep you humble. And pride goeth before a fall. You want somebody to backslide and get real, real, real bad? Just let them think they're all that. I can't tell you how many people I've seen it, and I've seen it in preachers. In one case not too long ago, he fell terribly far. But But he still thinks he's all that. He thinks he's so smart, he got away with it. And he thinks he's still getting away with it. Hey, you don't get away with it. But if you want to fall on your face big time, then that's how you do it. You do it by thinking you're all that. Because pretty soon if you think you're all that, then you think you're better than other people. And then you deserve what other people don't deserve. And it just goes from one thing to another. And you can't serve God that way. You've got to get over it or you'll fail. And he took a child and he set him down and he said, whoever receives one of these children in my name, you don't have to go like Trump did today and talk to the king of a country. Just treat this little child good. Whoever receiveth him receiveth me. Whoever doesn't does not receive him, me. Now we go to John being rebuked. We have it in John 18 and in Mark 9 and Luke 9 only has 2 verses. Whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it were to be better for you if a millstone was tied around your neck and you were thrown in the water and died. Woe unto the world because of offenses. Wherefore, if your hand or your foot offends you, cut it off. Now, it's kind of hard for us to figure this one out. Because my hand doesn't do anything that my head doesn't tell it to do. Maybe if something itches and I go like that, my head hasn't bothered to tell it. But our body parts don't function independent of us. And he said, if your eye offends you, pluck it out. Well, it isn't really the eye that's at fault. It's whatever the person that has the eye does. But he said, if, not that it's this way, but if your eye offended you, wouldn't it be better to take out the eye and go into heaven with just one eye? Yeah, if something your eye was doing was going to keep you from going to heaven, then take it out. Better be one eye in heaven than 2-eyed in hell. It's better for you to enter into life with one eye rather than having 2 eyes and to be cast into hellfire. And he talks more about the little ones. He said, take heed of them, don't despise them. And then he talks about the 100 sheep. I have a friend. In fact, I just learned he has cancer. He was the first pastor that I ever ran into, Spanish speaking. And he didn't speak English and I didn't speak Spanish. And he had just come up from Mexico. Since he has become a well-known person in Sunday school and music and in many, many areas. Lost my place again. He wrote a song. There were 99 in the fold. I'm translating it in my head. It's a beautiful song, beautifully well written, musically and words also. But he said, how think ye if a man has 100 sheep and one goes astray? He has shown how important a little child is. And now he's showing how important one sheep is. He says, doesn't he leave the 99 and go to the mountains and seeketh that which is gone astray? And if so, and he finds it, verily I say unto you, he rejoices more for the one sheep than for the 99 that didn't go astray. So when we get to thinking we're all that because we haven't gone astray and so over there has, remember when the Lord brings home one that has gone astray, he's happier than he is for 99 that didn't go astray. And then we get to forgiveness and prayer. Jesus says in Matthew 18, and that's the only place we have it. If your brother trespasses against you, go tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If somebody does something to you, you don't have to tell the whole church. Oh yeah, but you could get so much sympathy if you did. And that's just exactly how to make people feel. Jesus said, if somebody trespasses against you, it's between you and him. You go alone to him. Because maybe if you do that, you will win him back. Remember a week or two ago, I told you why I did not believe the phrase, wait a minute, whatsoever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Remember, I told you that it was mentioned in 3 places in the Bible, but only one place mentioned that. And if you read just those 3 or 4 verses, it looks as though Jesus is saying to Peter, I'm going to build my church on you. And whatever you loose will be loosed, and whatever you set free will be set free. Whatever you bind up. And remember, I told you that in those days, I wasn't there. I have to read history. I can believe it. I can disbelieve it. It's up to me. It's up to the historians whether I trust them or not. But I told you, I doubt it that those words should be interpreted that Jesus was building a whole world of believers upon one man, and that one man would be followed by another and followed by another and followed by that other, and that man would rule the church. And the church means the whole body of believers in the whole world. And I told you that one of the reasons I disbelieved it was because out of 3 people that saw the same thing and wrote the same thing, only one went into detail. The other 2 didn't mention it. And that it wasn't mentioned anywhere else in the Bible in that way. Well, here we have the words mentioned again. And it's not talking about that at all. It says, if you neglect to hear them, so let me back up. He said, if anybody offends you, it's between you and them, go to them. If he will not hear you, take 1 or 2 more. And in the mouth of 3 or 4 witnesses, every word will be established. I was known in the church as a minister. It was an old German fellow in the church. Very good Christian, very strict. We had a new pastor. Every pastor has a tendency of putting his wife and children forward. If they sing, they're going to be the singers in the church. I mean, that's the way it is. That same church had 3 people that could play the piano and 1 that could play the organ. They wanted to rotate the 3 on the piano, but the pastor's wife was playing the organ. I says, why don't you rotate the organ players too? I mean, that's human nature. I don't know of a pastor that doesn't do that, and I don't know one that does it and realizes what he's doing, but that's what they do. They know the talent their own family has, but they don't know the talent that you have, and so they go with what they know. But he says, if you go with the one person and you don't get any satisfaction there, take 1 or 2. So this other person said, would you go with me? This new pastor had a daughter that was in college. She was in a Christian college. I don't know how she dressed there, but she didn't dress too good in church. It was during a time when young girls wore miniskirts. There were a lot of people in the church that could have led the singing. This was back before they had praise teams or worship teams. And you had a song leader. There were other people, but he was new to the church. He didn't know what talent was in the church, but he knew what talent was in his family, and he wanted to encourage your daughter. Now, you can't blame a man for that. And she would climb up the steps to the platform, and the old guys in the church were, oh, that's terrible. Did you see that? Oh, my, that's horrible. And they're following her with their eyes all the way up. They're not missing a thing. And it really was not appropriate. And he needed somebody with a little bit more experience, I guess, to tell him that. So they asked me if I would go and have a talk with them. This is where this text comes from. He told me, he said, I really wanted to encourage my daughter. He said, we tried to get her to wear one of my wife's dresses, and she wouldn't. We asked her to wear a choir robe. And they didn't have a choir, but I guess they had a choir robe, and she didn't. A pastor is in a difficult position because he has his own family to look after, and he has the church to look after. And if the two don't jive, then something's got to give. This is where this scripture comes from. And if you shall neglect to hear them, that was me, the other person they brought along. Then you tell it to the church. Then it comes time when you say to the church, we didn't mean to do the wrong thing. But I'm a father, I love my daughter, I want my daughter to serve the Lord, I want to encourage her, but I didn't make the right choice. When she refused to wear her mother's dress, and she refused to wear a choir robe, and she refused to buy something that would not offend her father's church, and she didn't, that's the time to say, sorry, honey, I'm your daddy, but I'm also a pastor. Then you tell it to the church. And if the church agrees and says, that's right, you shouldn't do that, let him be under thee as a heathen and a publican. In other words, if this person that's hurt you, and you've gone to them, and you've taken another spiritual leader with them and gone to them, and you've brought the matter to the church, then treat this person like they're not even a Christian because they're not acting like one, and you can't cause the church to suffer. You can't say one thing to your church and another thing to your family. Then he says, verily I say unto you, whatsoever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. If you allow it, and that's what I told you a week or two ago, that it meant. If they allow it, then I loose you. You're free. If they don't, I bind you. You're not free to continue doing it. Again, I say unto you, if two of you agree touching any one thing on earth that you ask, it shall be done of you of my Father in heaven. And many times you'll hear a Christian say, I'd like you to pray and agree with me in prayer for such and such. For where two or three are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them. You can be blessed in the church that only a couple of people come to. And you can be in a church that thousands go to and not be blessed. And it works both ways. Doesn't mean that just because the church is small, it's holy. And it doesn't mean that just because it's big, all the people in it are right with God. Now we come, and I want to see how far we are for some other things. We're pretty close to Jesus being the light of the world, and I'll probably stop when I get that far. Then Jesus goes to, well, wait a minute, we have the unmerciful servant. This is going to get you. Then came Peter and said, Lord, how often, if my brother sins against him, do I have to forgive him? 7 times 7, that'd be 49. Yeah, he's going into old law. Jesus says 70 times 7. The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king. And this king's got a bunch of servants. They're under him. One of them owes him 10,000 talents. And the king says, okay, you've had it. You're going to sell yourself and your wife and your kids. How do you sell yourself and your wife and your kids? They did that in those days. On the year of Jubilee, all bets were off. All debts were canceled. But between now and the year of Jubilee, which is every 50 years, you could sell yourself into service. If a man didn't have the money to feed his family, he could borrow the money. He could get the money, give it to his family, but he then became a servant. And he says, okay, we're going to sell you, your wife, and your kids. You all go into servitude. And the servant fell down and worshipped him and said, Lord, have patience with me, and I'll eventually pay everything back to you. So the Lord of the servant was moved with compassion, and he said, cancel your debt. You owe me nothing. Now that was 10,000 talents. Now the guy that's just been forgiven of everything, servitude for himself, his wife, and his kids, just had his debt wiped clean. He's got a guy that owes him money. And he owed him 100 pence. Pence is less than a talent, and that's 100 over again 1,000. And he laid him by the hands, he grabbed him, and he said, pay me what you owe. And he grabbed him by the throat. And the servant fell down at his feet, and he begged him, have patience with me, and eventually I'll pay it all to you. But he didn't. And he cast him in prison until his debt was paid. When the other servants saw what was going on, they told the master what was going on. And he called him in and said, "You wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because that's what you desired. Should not you have had compassion on another fellow servant like I had on you? So likewise shall my heavenly Father do also unto you, if you from your hearts forgive not every one of your brothers this." All right, now we go to Jesus is in Jerusalem. He's in Jerusalem for a feast, the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles were feasts to remember when they were in the desert and wandering around, and from time to time they lived in a little hut or whatever they could, a little lean-to or whatever they could put together. Jesus walked in Galilee. He didn't go where the Jews were because the Jews were trying to arrest him. Now it was the Jews' Feast of the Tabernacles. So his brethren said, "Let's go. For there's no man that doeth anything in secret, and he seeketh to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." And Jesus said, "It's not my time yet. I know I told you that I would die. I would be raised again, but it's not time. If I were to go where these Jews are that hate me now, I'd be in trouble because it's not time. They'll try to kill me now, and it's not my time." Jesus knew about Daniel's prophecy. Some of us are just understanding it, but Jesus understood it. He said, "My time's not come yet. Your time is always ready." Get up and go to the feast. I will not go to this feast, for my time is not yet ready. John 7:10 says he did eventually go, but he didn't go with his disciples. He either went and stayed in the background without his disciples, without anybody he knew present, or he went somehow disguised. But when his brethren were gone up, he also went to the feast, not openly, but as it were, in a secret. Now we have about the anticipation of Messiahship. We have it in John 7. It's very long, but it's all in John 7. Then we have the woman taken in adultery, and Jesus saying he's the light of the world. Let me do those, and then we'll end for tonight. We're getting close to an hour into our lesson. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. It's outside Jerusalem. Gethsemane you come to first. A mile or so later, you come to the Mount of Olives. Some of those olive trees are 3,000 years old, and they produce olives. Early in the morning, he came to the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. Oh boy. There are some Christian leaders, they just love to find a great big sinner and say, look at this big sinner. They wanted to see Jesus' reaction. They said, Master, this woman was taken in the very, 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 very act of adultery. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. We need to stone her till she drops dead. What do you say? They said this tempting him so they could accuse him. Jesus bent down, took his finger, and he wrote something in the sand. He acted as though he hadn't even heard him. They continued asking him. And he said, whichever one of you hasn't sinned, throw the first stone. When they heard it, their own conscience convicted them. Starting from the oldest, and then the next oldest, and then the next oldest, and going all the way down to the youngest. They walked away. And Jesus and the woman were standing there. And Jesus looked up, saw only her, and said, woman, where are your accusers? Anybody here accusing you? And she said, no man. And Jesus said, go and sin no more. See, having our sins spread across town is not what gets our sins forgiven. But having our sins forgiven because Christ has compassion on us, then is when they're really forgiven. And how do you know somebody's sins are forgiven? Because they don't do them again. Any man that says his sins are forgiven today and tomorrow he's doing the same ones, they weren't forgiven. That quoting the sinner's prayer, it's not a magical thing you say. It's just some preachers compose a prayer because a lot of people come forward in church and they have no experience and they don't know how to pray. We say, this is how you're supposed to pray. If you believe this, if you feel this in your heart, then you pray. We wonder, many preachers feel that what he wrote in the sand was probably nothing. But each person, when they looked at it, saw their own sins there. It's possible. Now Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Going back to our Wednesday night study, we studied about Jesus being the bread of life, sustains us, keeps us going, keeps us healthy. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me will never walk in darkness. And the Pharisees said, you bear record of yourself. You're bragging on yourself. Your record isn't true. And Jesus said, though I bear record of myself, my record is true. I know where I came from. I know where I'm going. Judge not after the flesh. Don't look at what you see and think you know a person. I'm not alone, but I and the Father that sent me, we bear testimony of two men is true. If I'm the one that bears witness of myself, if I'm bragging or talking about myself, and the Father that sent me is a witness of me. Then they say unto him, Where is thy Father? Jesus said, If you know me, you know my Father. Not if you've seen me. Not if you've seen me preach. Not if you know my name. But if you know me, then you know my Father. Would that we could all live so close to God that to see us would be to see God. Judge not after the flesh. I know that my record is true. I judge no man. I bear witness of my Father, and the Father that sent me bears witness of me. If you would know me, you would know my Father. Jesus said this while he was teaching in the temple. And he said, No man laid hands on him, for his hour had not come. I go my way, and you'll seek for me, and I'll die in your sins. Whither I go, the place I'm going to, you can't go there with me. And the Jews are saying, what's he talking about? He going to kill himself? Because he said, whither I go, you cannot come. And he said, you are of this world. And I say unto you, you shall die in your sins. And if you believe not that I am he, you will die in your sins. And Jesus said unto him, when you've lifted up the Son of Man, then you'll know that I'm him. I do nothing of myself, but I speak as my Father taught me. And he that sent me is with me. And the Father has not left me alone. I always do the things that please him. As he spake these words, many believed on him. Now today is 5/21. Okay, that's where we'll start next Sunday. We close the video, and then we'll do whatever it is we're going to do. Until the next video, blessings on you.